Hey, we're live with Remso Martinez. We've had him on as a guest before with Acculturate. We read some of his articles on vaping. The FDA and Trump look like they're doing a big push to ban vaping. And Remso had written some articles about this, and we wanted to dive in and untangle this mess. Like, what is this direction we're going in? Like, what do you feel about these busybodies banning vaping?
This is another one of those situations where it falls between this fine line of genuinely good intentions and just unnecessary virtue signaling. There have been recent reports in the last couple of weeks of deaths linked to vaping, linked to juuling. But what we are seeing is a large number of people that are susceptible to popcorn lung. It's what you get when you get corn syrup and some of the other artificial ingredients in there to actually create the viscousness that actually generates the vape. So what we've seen over the last 5-7 years of this big vaping boom, and we're in a bit of a vape renaissance, is the fact that you have a lot of people that are going from cigarettes, which are filled with all the terrible things in the world, dangerous carcinogens, frog guts, tar, you name it, it's in there. And they're actually leaving those and they're going to vaping. Vaping has less of the ingredients. It still has nicotine. And for a while, what they tried to do is they tried saying nicotine was the big problem. Well, nicotine is no different than caffeine and other addictive chemicals. The purpose of nicotine in cigarettes is simply to create addictive behaviors. Once you go ahead and put that in there, you're going to actually go ahead and get people to crave the things that they might not necessarily crave, because what they're really focused on is their brain is telling them we need more nicotine. So what they're really trying to get off of isn't any of the other necessary ingredients in cigarettes, but the nicotine. So by going over to vaping, you're helping people wean themselves off of that over time. So hopefully they'll get away from that and the whole habit of smoking and vaping entirely. But the big problem right now is we're dealing with $1 billion industry, even more than that. Big tobacco, what we have here in Virginia, has been lobbying our state government for over a year. And recently they passed a bill saying that you can't purchase vaping or e-cigarette products until you're 21 or older. Good for them. But the big problem is, big tobacco, they already have generations upon generations of clients. So those people are still going to make their money. But what they wanted to do was they wanted to go ahead and cut off the point of which vaping was a good cultural trend. You were seeing a lot of people, young adults, go ahead and get into vaping. You were in some cases seeing children vaping. They were replacing that with cigarettes because they realize that cigarettes will kill you. So what we're seeing right now with the FDA and with all these different lobbying groups going after e-cigarettes and Juul specifically is the fact that it's not necessarily by people that want to go ahead and ban just e-cigarettes or cigarettes in general. A lot of these are actually sponsored and pushed for by the tobacco companies in order to effectively kill this competing industry. So it's less about actually fighting something which might be bad for people. It's more about just killing market competition. And what we're seeing right now from the FDA during, in the midst of the Trump administration is the fact that a lot of the research and studies that they're putting out are from 2015, 2013, years and years ago. A lot of the chemicals, a lot of the harsh metals and toxins we're seeing in there in those studies were already taken out by the market themselves. These companies already found out that what was in the mods, what was in the juices, we got to take it out. So the market was fixing it before the government even found out it was there. But at the end of the day, this has nothing to do with actually, stopping people from doing something which is harmful. It's all about just curbing market behavior.
Well, what I love is I don't see a lot of people scrutinizing the FDA, because the FDA has this moral high ground, I feel like, public image where they're looking out for our health. And I saw you were excoriating in your article. You were saying they allow disgusting things in our food. They let all sorts of things slip through the cracks. It seems like the FDA is very outdated and they're not skeptical enough about the FDA. And I thought you were very targeted in that way. And I thought it was very spot on. So where did that skepticism come from?
It came with the fact that, when we look at things in the marketplace, such as consumer protection, what we need to understand is that government is inherently slow. Sometimes it's slow because, when you have a bunch of bureaucracies working at the same time, things get miscommunicated, people assume things just don't move because government doesn't really have an incentive to move forward on certain things, especially when it comes to consumer protection. Whereas when you go ahead and look at the private market, what we have is we have competing labs. We have competing consumer protection companies, private labs and corporations that are moving at twice, light years ahead of how long it takes the FDA to do something. On average, I'm pretty sure it takes about 15 to 20 years for a new medication to actually get approved by the FDA. So when we look at the pharmaceutical industry, whereas one lab can get you results rather quick, when you want to go ahead and propose it to the FDA, get the FDA label and the approval to go ahead and become an over-the-counter prescription drug or something else, you're going to wait a long time. You're going to spend a lot of money basically footing the bill for their own research. So when it came to this, I began to realize that, when we look at the pool of people that are coming in and out of the FDA, a lot of these people are coming in from different companies. When we look at the Department of Agriculture, when we look at the FDA, we're seeing a lot of people coming in from Monsanto. We're seeing a lot of people come in from Bayer, Johnson & Johnson. So these people don't really have a big incentive to go after their own interest, because then after that they leave government, then they go back to Johnson & Johnson or Monsanto, and they just go ahead and they get a bigger paycheck and they go on speaking tours and stuff, because now they are these big successful lobbyists and they have some federal experience. So we're seeing this rotating door effect. So when you combine just the inadequate results we're getting from this bureaucracy, combined with the fact that it's far, far less superior than we really think when it compares to private labs and these other markets, we got to ask, what are they actually doing, and do they really have our best interest at heart when they are working?
I think you're exactly right. The FDA is really about curbing market behavior, and they're really trying to avoid negative PR. And this is why Milton Friedman would talk about the FDA as being a big silent killer. So if the reason why you delay a drug entering the market for 20 years is because, let's say, one of these drugs has negative side effects on births. They're going to plaster those pictures everywhere. It's going to be a big PR nightmare. And so they'd rather delay new drugs entering the market to avoid any of these negative side effects that they didn't catch. The problem is that same precautionary principle is applied to potentially life-saving drugs. So let's say you have, where does the audacity for Biden, while he's running for president, say, if I win the presidency, I'll cure cancer? It's preposterous for him to have that audacity, that confidence, unless he has inside information we're not aware of. I don't know why someone thinks they'd win the presidency and cure the emperor of all maladies, right? Just because, what's he going to do? And I think that's the big problem. Is here we've got the Juuls. Obviously, you have South Park comparing the Juul pods to the Kool-Aid Man in one of their episodes, and people are making jokes like Trump and Melania probably caught Barron smoking a vape, and now this is why they're just trying to virtue signal. But you're not a vapor, are you? Do you vape?
Well, I did for a little bit, and I was a smoker for a while.
And did it help you?
Oh, absolutely. Because, it got to the point where, I was completely dependent on nicotine just to get throughout the day. And the nicotine was the big problem. The nicotine, when you go through nicotine withdrawal, it's not fun. So, it did help me get through that. But the biggest thing that I think people need to understand going forward when it comes to this is the fact that, just focusing on the FDA specifically, I think one of the best examples of, the FDA being both, just a bureaucratic waste of time, as well as also being a weapon for people with special interest to go ahead and manipulate market behavior, is the Dallas Buyers Club. We had medications, we had formulas to go ahead and help bend the AIDS crisis and the HIV crisis in the 80s, except we don't want to do that because we don't want to look at the fact that there are people who exist in our society who live a different lifestyle. So why would we save them when we could just have them be sick? I forgot who the press secretary was during the Reagan administration. He asked, there are millions of Americans with AIDS. And during the midst of the AIDS crisis, this press secretary goes, "What's AIDS?" So it's not that these people are just, willfully ignorant, innocent, gaffable public servants. It's the fact that, a lot of them know exactly what they're doing. And that's the real harsh part.
Yeah. And what makes me a little worried is how this is the kind of behavior that, a lot of non-smokers aren't going to care. That, it's like, it's not as extreme as the Dallas Buyers Club problem. But, if you're healthy and you're not a smoker, you're not a vapor, you're going to see the FDA ban this product and you're thinking, well, it doesn't affect me, you know? And the problem is you're allowing this government overreach, which I think does harm the market. And I do think, I mean, where did you get that information about the tobacco lobbyists? Is that your gut telling you that? Because I remember that movie, Thank You for Smoking. Aaron Eckhart in that is he.
That's a hilarious film.
I love I love that film.
I mean, a lot of the stuff is public record. We have a bit of a Pravda network here in Virginia called the Republican Standard, which is run by a former member of the Republican Committee here in Virginia. And basically, what they do is they go ahead and highlight past Republican bills and Republican legislation. And what they did was they went ahead and spoke about how this was big bipartisan wins for Republicans because they passed a bill with Democrat support. Then what we had the Danville Register and the News and Advance in Lynchburg, Virginia. What they went ahead and they did was they looked at the money and where the lobbyists came from. And I don't remember the exact name of the lobbying firm, but they represented the biggest tobacco producer on the East Coast. And primarily what you had was eventually they released a statement after everyone followed the money. And they're like, wait, why is big tobacco going after vaping? And they tried saying that, we're doing this on ourselves. We don't want people to purchase cigarettes, tobacco products or vaping. But the thing is, when you go ahead and you look at the market share of cigarettes and tobacco and vaping, you can see that these guys aren't really going to get cut much. Whereas when you have a big growth baby industry, which is in a boom and is taking a cut from these guys because the more vapors, the less smokers, that's going to go ahead and create a problem.
Yeah, so the FDA is basically protecting the tobacco cartel, right? Is really what effectively is going on.
I mean, we've seen this with Monsanto, and they were going ahead and they were trying to protect the Roundup Ready spray and everything else, and those soybeans that are genetically modified to go ahead and harm the crops of other farmers that have inferior soybeans. I mean, when you look at the corn, the ethanol, and the soy industry in America, like you touch them, they'll go at you like an actual cartel. It's dangerous to your house. And no, like what's happening is there's a documentary that came out probably a decade ago called Food Inc., where basically the small Montana farming family, they were being harassed by Johnson & Johnson, I think Monsanto, and basically what they would do was these guys would drive up to their crops in the middle of the night, take random samplings, and what they saw was that if your neighbor had the Roundup Ready being created by Monsanto, what happens sometimes, stuff drifts. Wind will go ahead and pick up something. Maybe a seed will go ahead and move into your territory. So if they found one evidence that any of the strain of your crops was carrying that GMO label on there, they would sue you for theft. So then what are you going to do when you're a family farm and you're going up against one of the largest corporations in the world that's protected by the government?
Right. Well, and this is also something that's close to you. In one of your articles, you're talking about how it was your grandfather who was a smoker. Yeah. So this is, I think people should take this stuff seriously. There's so much going on in the news these days. It's hard to keep up with everything. Like this might seem like the smallest little blip. We're also probably talking to a lot of sympathetic, Trumpers, MAGA. I'm voting Trump 2020, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be on strong defense here when it comes to
I say the same thing about Trump on guns. I think he's, conceded on suppressors and conceded on constitutional carry and even bump stocks just because he wanted to virtue signal because he doesn't really care on that. But the thing is, I think the next fight, which we're seeing right now is, vaping, smoking, anything like that, it's culturally unpopular. So of course it's very easy to go after something which is unpopular now. But I very much see within the near future, the next big battle is going to be soda.
You maybe they're going after soda.
I know they're going after soda and energy drinks. They're doing it right now.
They tried that in New York.
They did that in Philadelphia. And the reason why they did that was because several people that were in the pockets of a couple other lobbies for, healthy living, and all these healthy lifestyle lobbies. They all, their biggest goal is just to get into the schools, start going directly to the kids, so get the kids off soda. But really what they were doing was they were doing it as a mechanism to fight against the Teamsters unions, because the Teamster unions, the truckers that go ahead and deliver all this stuff, when they make their endorsements, they weren't endorsing the right people. When they weren't giving enough money. So when you have less soda going into your city, that means you have less truckers coming in. That means that there's a less of demand for everything else to circulate. So what that did was that closed down, I think, a whole chain of CVS stores in town. Local consumption of other products went down as well. A whole ton of people lost their job. We're talking just working class retail people, as well as a whole lot of truckers. So the whole point of that, they kept saying, oh, all the money's going to go to schools. We're going to go ahead and have a bunch of healthier people. All they did was buy cheaper stuff. All they did was just change the way their market behavior was. They bought different products. They went to other stores. They bought outside of the city. So what they did was they destroyed their own local economy just to go ahead and fill a grudge.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on, Remso. We're going to put up your articles and share them with our clips and with the video. And people know I'm very passionate about accelerating medical innovation in the market. And I think the FDA is like one of the biggest monoliths in the way of really changing the game. And so when I see them infringing on our rights in these ways, which are so transparent when you do unentangle the whole mess, these are complicated issues, but I think social media is helping people wake up, and, we still live in the greatest democracy in the world, and we can make a lot of amazing things happen. So I want to thank you, Remso, so much for coming on. It's really been a pleasure, and let's talk again soon.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Jules. Thank you.